Good morning. Happy Sabbath. Can you hear through? Thank you for welcoming here. This is my second Sabbath here in this church. I'm getting adjusted slowly. I wish my stuff would be shipped, but, it takes time, and I wish my wife could be here, but, things happen, and it's either odd or God, and I'm too odd, so we just have to chalk that up to being God. This sermon, of course, is not the first time preaching this sermon. I have written this sermon when I was in the Philippines, and I remember in my conversion reading through the Bible text that was read to you, and it made me really start to think how God works, what God does compared to the world. So think about something that we as human beings think is foolish. What is it that we do in this world today that the world looks at us and say, that's crazy. Yeah, I would never do that. I remember getting started into the ministry. A person came to me, oh, don't do that. Don't do that. That's not good. And ended up being one of the best things, for me. I started to think about foolish things in the world. Now, I have a different opinion from historians that the Wright brothers were not the first people to fly. I believe that our antediluvian period, they had flying machines, pre-flood. But in the modern history, the Wright brothers. And for centuries, right, thousands of years, in the medieval Europe, people wanted to fly. And the Catholic Church would say, oh, that's satanic, They would condemn people. And we had some pretty smart, ingenious people. But I came and I remember listening to the story of the Wright brothers by the Your Story Hour. You remember the Your Story Hour? Aunt Sue, Uncle Dan. I remember their story, and those boys had that little helicopter thing that you would spin and up into the air it would go, right? And how it amazed them, and how they got into bikes at first. They did bicycles. And then somewhere in there, they remembered the helicopter with the bicycle, and they tried to figure out how to put a powerful enough engine onto something that can fly. The concept was there. No one had done it until that fateful day in North Carolina where they actually flew. I think it was 112 feet. Don't quote me. And they flew. But people have said for years, if God wanted man to fly, he would give them wings, right? And people always said, oh, you're foolish. Why are we spending money on this? Why should we spend money on this? And today, we're going into outer space. We're going places around the world. So what people thought was foolish has now become a lot of laws that we learn. The law of aerodynamics and many things, gravity, Isaac Newton. So we have developed more knowledge, more things that people thought was foolish. So God a lot of times takes the foolish things of this earth and he uses it for his greatest glory. And uses human weaknesses in that. So let us pray. Father in heaven, I want to come today. I want to offer myself to thee. I want to offer the congregation to you. Those that are not here, those that are here. Father in heaven, I wish to pray for your outpouring of your Holy Spirit. Open up their ears and their minds that they may hear and see and know Jesus Christ as he is. Open up my mouth, my lips, and my tongue, and help me to form the words and the thoughts that will bring you honor and glory. In his powerful name we pray. Amen. I'm not going to read the whole thing again, but I just want to read two parts. But God has chosen the foolish things, this is 27, of the world to put to shame the wise. And God has chosen the weak things of the world to put to shame they that are mighty. As it is written, he who glories, let him glory in the Lord. You can go through the Bible and you can see testimony after testimony in the Scriptures of weak overcoming mighty. One of my favorite stories, partly because we share the same name, is the young shepherd boy David. Right? We heard this story. Hopefully most of us, all of us have heard this story. For those that are online that would actually hear this one day or that are listening, David was probably 14, 15 years old. He was just a young man. He was the youngest of 7 brothers, 3 sisters. So he was the youngest child. And of course, in these days, I'm the oldest child. I mean, not the oldest child, but I'm the eldest son. My sister is older than me. But in those days, my sister being older than me, she was the least. I was the greatest because I was the firstborn son. Right? But David, he was son number 7. Pretty good for his mother to produce 7 sons and 3 daughters. And so he was young. And when he was called by God, he was just a ruddy youth. And so Samuel went and he said, Jesse, bring your boys. Jesse said, sons, we're going to the feast. David, you stay with the sheep, girls. Stay with your mother. We boys are going to go worship the Lord. When they got there, Samuel asked the boys to pass before. Nope, not this one. Nope, not this one. Nope, not this one. And all of a sudden you can hear Samuel question, there's no more boys. And he'd go, is this all of your boys? No, we have one more. He's attending the sheep, but he's quite young. He says, we will not sit down and worship the Lord until he comes. Well, the Lord chose David. Fast forwarded a couple years, Israel and the Philistines go to war. Spring raids or fall raids, to steal as much resources from the other people. But this time, when they meet, they have a giant on the other side who is cursing the living God. Now, Israel, from a sin of themselves, wanting to be like all the other nations, asked for a king. We want a king that will go before us, lead us into battle, and lead us out of battle. And so God chose one of the tallest men in Israel. They say King Saul was head and shoulders taller than most people. I spent 13 years in Southeast Asia. Most Filipino men were to here on me. I'm pretty tall there. Now at the KS, where I studied there at the Adventist International Institute of Advanced Study, I wasn't the tallest. There was a few teachers and a few other people from Europe, Americas that came that challenged me in height. But when I go out into my district, I was pretty tall. So Saul was head and shoulders taller than all of Israel. Some people say that he was probably 6'10" or 7 feet tall. He was a big man, mighty. And Goliath made him look small. But they chose. If anybody had any chance of defeating Goliath, Saul would have been that man. So for 40 days, Israel stood on one side, Philistines on the other side. 40 days, morning and evening worships. Goliath would come out and curse the living God. Make fun of Israel and their God. One day, Jesse's thinking, he says, 3 of my boys are in that army of Saul. It's been 40 days. Their food must be running out. David, come here. I have a job for you. And he sent David, odd or God. Jesse's too odd, so it has to be God that David went. And David got there in the evening time with this food. And he took it and delivered it to the captain in charge of supplies. And then he went to find his brothers. And as he's about ready to find his brothers, he heard the booming voice of Goliath making fun of Israel and their God. David is now anointed with the Holy Spirit, right? Samuel anointed him. If you are anointed by God, called by God, when someone makes fun of God, you will stand up. It's just natural. It's part of it. Evil and good cannot stand together. And so David said, who will fight this guy? Who's going to fight? This is what you've been dealing with? And David's brothers, being shamed, passion for the Lord, chastised him. Did it stop him? No. His passion to serve the Lord, he started to talk to others. And then he talked to others. And it finally got to King Saul that there's a young man who wishes to fight this giant. And he went before Saul. So now imagine Goliath standing there cursing Israel, cursing the God of Israel, when out walks a ruddy youth, 14, 15 years old. How would you feel? You're a man of war. Now, I spent 10 years in the Marine Corps. I know war. I've trained for war. I can shoot someone, well, maybe not anymore because I can't see as well as I used to, but I can shoot a man's hand at 500 meters, 550 meters, and if you waved it, I will hit it every time. I was a pretty good shot at a good distance. I trained for war from the time I was 19 until the time that they retired me in the military. Now, I know enough in fighting to get myself hurt really good, but Goliath had trained for war. He was equipped, and here with a shepherd's rod, immediately his pride is offended. You've waited 40 days and now you're sending a boy to do the job of a man? Now he starts assaulting David. And of course David says, the battle is not mine, but the Lord's. And he slew. And Israel won one of the greatest victories in Israel's history. A boy defeated a man of war. People would have said, it's foolish. Matter of fact, a lot of people, even Saul said, you can't fight this man. But God was glorified that day because David was obedient. That should have been Saul's victory. But Saul had chased away the Lord by going against the will of the Lord. In the New Testament, the way Jesus Christ came to this earth was foolish. I mean, you are the God of God and the King of kings, the mighty Creator. Your enemy is the most powerful created creature. The difference between Christ and Satan is Christ is divinity. He is God himself. Satan was the first of the created creatures, given the most power. He had a lot of power. He had a lot of authority. He can do things, but he could not create. And he had to stay within the realms that God created him to do. So how would you feel if you're Satan and here is a tiny, newborn infant? My first child, when she was born, I put her head here, and her butt came to here, and her leg stuck on one side, and I can carry her around. She was just a little tiny thing. Now, I wasn't so little when I was born. I was 10 pounds, 15 ounces. I think. And my brother was 10 pounds, 14 ounces. And my sister was like 9 pounds, and my younger brother was like 8 pounds, somewhere there. So the reality is Christ came as an infant, and immediately Satan tried to kill him. His life as a child was in the utter dependence upon upon God in the heavens, to defend him, to protect him, to look after him. And as he grew, because Christ was fully divine, he had not lost the divine connection that we had lost with God. So he would spend hours in nature praying. He would take his food that his mother would give him, and he would give it to the homeless man on the street. Or he would feed a little bird with a broken wing. You read the Spirit of Prophecy in the Desire of Ages book, you will see that Christ was always doing things for someone else. His nature brought shame to the Pharisees even in those days. Your Quiet Hour did a video on Mary and the life of Jesus, and it's about the story about the Pharisees chastising Mary for not sending Jesus to worship, to learn at the school of the rabbis. And they're talking about how he is going against the law of God, and Mary's heart is a mother, and there are men and women coming and saying, this is what Jesus did for me. This is what Jesus did for me. And the rabbis are saying to the guard, are you going to do something? We're in charge. And this guard with his shield and his sword says, but this is what he did for me. The living testimony, the example, the ambassador of God's love. And he did that from the time he was a small child until he became an adult at the age of 30, where he can actually go and do his mission. It is said that he won favor with God and man. He did what we were and should have done. He was the second Adam. He did what Adam was supposed to do. Now, the other thing that was the most interesting is the form of his death. It says in the scriptures, cursed be the man who hangs on a tree. Christ was not only hung upon the tree, he was nailed to that tree. His manner of his death was a death that brought total humiliation, stripped naked. Upon the cross was his manner of his death. Now, Satan wasn't really trying to kill him. He wanted to kill him. He wanted to take the honor and glory. But he was trying to put as much pain and suffering to get him to call allegiance from heaven, to take him off the cross and say, these people are not worth it. That's what Satan was trying to do. And when he couldn't do it, then he tried to really kill him. But Satan couldn't kill. Christ allowed himself to die. So you think about the manner in which his death is. His death upon the cross won the greatest victory in all of humankind. The victory over sin. The victory, eventually, over death. the victory over Satan. Our status as human beings was sealed on Christ's death, and we can choose to believe and accept and follow and even meet with God. He opened the way for us to have that communion with God. And most every man upon the earth, even his 12 disciples, said, "No, you can't do this. That's too shameful." One accepted his death, Mary Magdalene. Because we know at Simon, she washed his feet. She heard, she listened. Judas kind of encouraged it because he thought that Christ would never allow himself. Because their belief was Christ was supposed to be what? A conquering king. Like us in the end days, right? We believe Christ was coming, but we had the right event. We had the wrong event at the right time. And that was the same thing in the time of Christ's life and death. The wrong event, the right time. They knew that the Messiah was to come, but they thought he would come as a conquering king. That conquering king is for us. See? So his manner of his life, his death, showed the weakest of the weakest God's greatest victory. I want to share a story with you in closing. There was this, in 1992, University for the first time. For the first time, basically. I was 19 years old. We had freshman orientation. The room in Berman where they brought freshmen was filled up with us freshmen. And the administrators of the school was there. The deans were there from all the different departments in the school. I was there. My roommate, Gary Gibson, was there. Lori Allen was there, who later I married. Elaine Domingo was there. And there were several of my other friends. And then there was this lady. Her name was Barbara Tyson. She was in her mid-50s. When you looked upon her, she had a scar on her face, coming down the side of her face. You could see on her neck where she had major scars. To take off her shirt, it would go down to her arm, on her back. At the age of 10 years old, she was hit and run over by a car in Detroit, Michigan. She was a inner city black lady. And at the age of 10, she was hit, run over, and her ability to communicate was slow. She was able to graduate high school. She was able to get married. She raised her children, and her husband had died. And she had a dream to go to college and to serve the Lord. That was what her dream was. And when her husband died, he had raised up enough money for her to go to Andrews University College of Theology, because that was her dream. He loved her very much. And he told his son, "You see that your mother is taken care of. Take her this if she chooses to go." So she was a part of my freshman class. She wasn't quite right. She was, normal as most people, but her mental acuities was low. Her IQ was like in the 80s, not too high. 75, 70, I think is 75 as a teacher, I think is, if you're below 75, that takes you out of the normal classes. You can go on special ed, I think, is how it goes. Don't quote me on that one. So she was slow, but she was the sweetest lady you ever met. And I met her there, and then we went to this small group on a Sabbath afternoon where we got to listen and we got to talk to her. And that quarter, I took 3-4 classes with her. And we became friends. Now, she was a widower, so she lived in married housing, which was even better than visiting in the girls' dorm, Lamson Hall, Fort Lamson. You could go there, you could sit in the lobby, but there were so many guys sitting there in both the east and the west lobby, were so many guys in there trying to talk to girls. It wasn't easy to, meet the girls that you wanted to meet. And of course, when we would go over to her house and we'd sit in her house, we'd sing songs, eat popcorn, watch a movie, especially on a Sabbath afternoon during the winter months. So we spent a lot of time with this woman. Now, towards the end of the school year, her and I was called into the dean's office at Andrews University to the College of Theology. There was like seven people there, and they spoke to all of them. Then they came out in this Barbara there left over. Shut the door. He said, I want to talk to both of you. You both are not called to the ministry. It's like a knife in my chest. I thought for sure I was called to the ministry. But I'm just 20 years old now. I have no formal education. This guy, he's a PhD. He's smart. He's an ordained minister. So I felt very discouraged. And I went and joined the Marine Corps. Barbara, she was hurt. And he was more gentle to her than he was to me. He said, Barbara, we know that your husband is giving you money. You could stay if you want, but we don't want you to waste the money. You're not doing so well academically. And so she went back home to her house in Detroit, Michigan, in the inner city. And we stayed friends. She would call once or twice a year. And one day, she called and said she was coming. And when she came, she had a big box. And we opened it up. And there was a big Bible. And on it was a black Jesus. Him praying in the Garden of Gethsemane. But the black Jesus. And she was so happy that she had it. And you open it up to Andrew and Lori from Barbara Tyson. So we put it on my grandmother's coffee table. And it took up 1/4 of the coffee table. She was so proud, so happy. She called me her white baby, her white son. And she wanted me to call her her black mother. She knew that my mother died. And her sympathetic heart, she wanted to mother me. And that's what she was trying to do, was to mother me. And she would call once or twice a year, and we would talk, and we'd spend time. And usually the time of the year came later on. Trying to figure out what's going on. When I got a phone call. Mama has died. If you can come, please come. We couldn't make it. We were in Wisconsin. She was in Detroit, Michigan. But we got pictures. Was told what was happening later on. You see, when she went home, and from her time that she was a young wife, she would go to the Muslims, she would go to the Buddhists, she would go to the fetal alcohol syndrome children, she would go to the homeless on the street, she would go to the feeding centers, she would give what she had at the time. The single mothers, she would visit those people in jail, she would visit those on the streets. She put herself in harm's way to visit people. At her funeral, tens of thousands of people came. She had touched more lives than about touching. She lived a simple life. She gave what she had. She did what she could. Where she was. Her mind was simple. Her words were simple. But the language she spoke, the language of Christ's love to the people around her. Alcohol, drug addicts, victims of rape, those who raped those people, homeless people, rich people, Muslims, Jews, Christians, Buddhists, it didn't matter. She went and she just talked to people and gave of what she had. I've seen her do it. That was Barbara Tyson. Barbara was broken. Barbara was a simple woman. She was not smart and intelligent like other people in the world. But her impact in her area where God had placed her was great. She never complained about what she didn't have. She never complained about having lots of money. Or not having lots of money. She never complained about how intelligent she was. She just did what she could where she was at. And what she did was love those who were hurting the most. Many times in our lives, we as human beings will complain, oh, we can't do this. It's impossible to do this. There are too many churches in the area. The saturation of Christianity is too great. We can't reach those people. My favorite one is, we don't have enough money. Or I don't have enough skill. And we look at what we don't have. But the question that God asks is, what do you have? Remember the woman who went to Elijah and said, he is a prophet and he has died. He was of the sons of the prophets and he died and he has a great debt. And now they're coming to take everything. They're going to take my inheritance, my 2 sons. Help. If anybody should be helped, it should be your servant who died, doing what you asked him. And what did he say? What do you have? And she says, I have nothing but a little jar of oil. So he gave her a command. He obeyed, and she had to pay all of her debts and to live off of the rest. God does not ask for you to be a mighty king. He doesn't ask for you to be a great general. He doesn't ask you to be the world's greatest evangelist. He asks you to love the people around you who needs love. To say, this is what Christ has done for me. And you do it by pulling out and helping someone around you. To do the little things, the simple things. Many people in the world say, oh, you have to be great to do something. And that's not true. You have to do what God asks you to do in the simplest form. And then he grows and works with you. God does not call the qualified. He qualifies the called. He took 12 angry men, 12 disciples that fought with each other, no formal education, fishermen, tax collectors, rebellion fighters, and just common people. And he made them the greatest evangelists in the world. And they used what gifts they had, not what they did not have. Barbara was broken and busted, ignorant and simple, and yet in her simple, humble way, she trusted the Lord and did what she could and touched more lives than most people will ever dream about touching. I know when she gets to heaven and she receives her crown, it's going to be very heavy with the gems in her. And there will be many evangelists who think they're great evangelists, and their crowns will be quite light. Because did they do what the Lord asked them to do? One of my favorite Bible texts you find in 2 Corinthians 12. This is called the thorn in the flesh. This is Paul writing. Paul is complaining because he has this thorn in the flesh. What scholars really think is some people say it's his eyesight. Now, I'm 52. Everybody's blurry back there. You're a little blurry over here for me. I can see over here somewhat. But you're blurry. When I was young, I can see forever. So Paul had and they think it was because at the Lord, he became blinded. Some people say he was bow-legged. Some people say he had poor health. Whatever it was, he called it a thorn in the flesh. That I cried to the Lord 3 times for it to be removed. And then the Lord said to him that he made this here as a buffer, lest he should exalt in himself. Why? Who was Paul? He was Saul. Saul was one of the greatest of one of the greatest rabbis in all of Israel in that time, in all of Judah. So he was one of the greatest scholars in Adventism history. In Jewish history. Powerful, highly educated man. And so unless he would be buffeted, God gave him this thorn in the flesh, which he pleaded for the Lord to remove. And then he pleaded, and then the Lord said to him, and I love this line, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness." So Paul says, "Therefore, the most gladly I would rather boast in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Therefore, I will take pleasures in infirmities, in reproach, in needs, and persecution, and distress, for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then I am strong." God does not call us to have it all together. God calls us in our brokenness. My conversion was because I was broken. I could not walk. I've been crippled from my experience in the military. Wheelchairs, walkers, and canes was my life. Every step I take, and even to this day, every step I take in pain. I used to curse God because of my pain. Now I bless Him because of the pain. In my brokenness, He came to me. In my brokenness, He uses me. My dyslexia, my ADHD, my PTSD, all of the things, my injury, I praise because I've given Him all that I am, all that I have. In my brokenness, He has called me. He gives me enough strength to sustain me every day I live. He provides for all of my needs. But He called me in my brokenness. He called me when I felt that I had nothing to give. God calls you, and He wants you to serve Him. It doesn't matter how old you are or how young you are. What is your education? Or even if you have any education. Doesn't matter if you can walk or if you're in a wheelchair. God wants you. So I leave with you a challenge today. I was taught you always need to give a challenge. And the challenge is, are you willing to be a fool for Jesus Christ?